There is a relatively new type of vehicle causing mayhem on our streets, and we now have the data to prove it. Since the introduction and popularization of these vehicles, pedestrian deaths have increased by 59%. In the event of a collision, a child is 8 times more likely to be killed than if they were hit by a small passenger car. In the city of Chicago alone, data shows that 20 deaths would have been prevented between 2017 and 2022 if these vehicles were not on our streets, and that is just one city in the world. They cause visibility issues at traffic lights and intersections. They're responsible for generally higher levels of pollutants and carbon dioxide emissions going into the atmosphere, releasing 700 megatons every year. With stats and data like this, it's clear we only have one option. We need to regulate the use of these vehicles in our cities before they kill more innocent people, many of whom are children. I'm talking about SUVs. Duh. Hello Electroheads, today I'm going to be scrutinising the recent stats on SUV versus e-scooter fatalities. I'm going to be looking at how one famous city is tackling auto obesity, and it is divisive. I'll be speaking to the charity Possible on how we can all play our part and what role electric scooters can play in all of this. So if that sounds good to you, keep watching. This is the new Land Rover Defender, which weighs just under 2,500 kilograms and has a powerful 200 horsepower twin turbocharged diesel engine. One just like this was recently involved in a devastating accident in Wimbledon, London, killing an 8-year-old child and seriously injuring a total of 16 children and adults. Devastating incidents like this raises an air of hypocrisy for us when we look at current legislation of electric scooters here in the UK, because when you look at the stats, how are these things legal and these aren't? Since 2019, there has been a total of 34 deaths involving e-scooters. This is, of course, 34 too many, but let's take a look at fatalities with cars in the city. Between 2016 to 2021, there have been 1,469 fatalities and many more seriously injured. Look, I'm not saying we need to ban SUVs because there is a legitimate use case for them, for example, for carrying, making them ideal for loading in families, and they've got good ground clearance, which makes them great for countryside terrain. Their popularity has boomed with drivers drawn to a higher road position that offers a feeling of security. But I do think we need to take a step back and really ask if we need to be using these huge vehicles for what can quite often be a single occupancy journey. Sure, if you have a disability and depend on a car to get around, nobody can argue with that. Although, for those who are able to use them, electric micromobility has proven to be an incredible swap-in for individuals with mobility issues. You can check out my video on me meeting a few of those people by clicking the link above. But inherently, SUVs represent a deadly problem on the roads of our cities.
Car use in the cities is a very, very ugly story, I'm afraid to say. The first thing that I will talk about is, of course, the climate crisis, because I work for a climate charity. Private car use produces a lot of emissions. To meet our climate goals, we need to cut car use by roughly 30% in our cities. We're nowhere near that target. You know, in the past couple of years, we've done what, maybe like 1%, 2%? It's not enough. Then the second thing is collisions. Roughly 30,000 people last year died or were seriously injured on Britain's roads, and that's because of car use. The third thing is toxic air. We know air pollution is a huge issue in cities. It's become higher up on the agenda, but it is killing us prematurely. It's giving us bad health. It's affecting our lungs. It's bad for us. And then there's all the other things in terms of like noise pollution. It affects our heart rate. It affects our sleep. It's not a pretty picture.
In the UK, pedestrian crashes involving SUVs increased by 81% between 2009 and 2016. An article in Forbes details a data crunch from British transport data experts using police crash data that goes back to 1979. Whilst the type of vehicle is not detailed, it's clear that cars with 1.8 litre to 2 litre engines have a higher fatality rate, 2% versus 1.4%, and this is likely to be speed and size related. More alarming is that the 2 litre to 3 litre category shows a 2.4% fatality rate. Across the pond, Chicago data scientists analysed local traffic crash data to discover that SUVs are 16% more likely to cause incapacitating injuries and 36% more likely to kill pedestrians than smaller cars. This number more than doubles for pickup trucks.
There's a limited amount of space in cities, and cars all crammed in means you're going to get congestion. Putting a big motorway will dissect communities. It aggravates isolation and loneliness in people. It means people don't feel safe to walk and cycle and move about. It's also particulate matter, which is those small particles that you get from the tires and from brakes. So it's like they rub off and they get into our lungs. The World Health Organization says, whilst we're making that transition to EVs, which is great because it reduces NOx, it means that we don't get those harmful fumes out of the engines, we do still get particulate matter, and that is the thing that they say is the most dangerous for our health. How far it's damaging us. We know it's causing lung cancer, we know it's causing infertility in men, we know it's aggravating dementia. Like there's so much packed in here, and the research is just getting stronger and stronger on this.
Paris is taking things into their own hands, with officials introducing new parking charges next year for larger, heavier vehicles. A new weight-based registration tax could see the owner of a new Land Rover Defender paying an extra one-off registration fee of €5,610. The lightest Defender weighs in at 2,361 kilograms, and in France, every kilogram above 1,800 kg costs €10 to register. However, EVs and those with large families requiring a bigger car are expected to escape the increased fees that will come into effect on the 1st of January 2024. The move focuses on auto-obesity, as they coined it. Here in the UK, commercial vans often have a speed restriction to just below the motorway speed limit of 70 miles per hour. So should we treat SUVs as a new classification of vehicle with different rules in the city? Do we also look into weight restrictions on non-commercial vehicles in our cities? But I am keen to hear your thoughts on this one, so let me know down in the comments. Although rental scooters no longer operate here, privately owned electric scooters are legal to ride on Parisian roads. You must be 14 plus years to ride on only roads and cycleways, have special e-scooter insurance to cover you for damages which can start from €3.30, be limited to 25 kilometers an hour, and if you speed you can face a €1,500 fine. E-scooters have been legal here for a few years now, and between 2021 to 2022 there have been 4 deaths in the city. In France, 22 deaths have been recorded in 2021, whereas motorist road fatalities were up at 1,414. Here in the UK, e-scooters are currently classed as powered transporters and fall under the same laws and regulations that apply to all motor vehicles in terms of requiring insurance, tax, MOT, licence and registration, which, to be frank, doesn't fit this lightweight mode of transport. The UK government has been deliberating on e-scooter legislation for years, collecting data with rental trials across the country, but now we need action. If we can encourage single occupancy drivers who are able out of their cars and onto electric scooters, we would see huge benefits to our local communities.
I think electric scooters do a great job of replacing single-use car journeys, and I think they can also expand public transport options in more rural or semi-rural areas as well, bringing things closer together. And that's really where we need to concentrate our efforts. What we don't want to see is people swapping in public transport or swapping in their cycle journeys for e-scooters, because we know that's worse for the environment. It also has implications as to exasperating discrimination and prejudice within the judicial system. So that's one of our findings, that black users of e-scooters are more heavily penalised and discriminated against. So we want clarity, and we think legalisation will bring clarity. We need legislation to help improve safety standards. I think put in minimum sized wheels that you need on e-scooters, put in those safety requirements so we're not getting the really cheap models coming in that we know have problems. But yeah, I'm for it.
New research by UCL reveals that replacing trips with e-scooters reduces congestion, saves time and cuts emissions by 45%. And before you say anything, this study accounted for the emissions produced throughout the entire life cycle of the e-scooter, from manufacturing to disposal. If you're looking for your own micromobility solution, we have collated our favourite brands onto one marketplace that we've reviewed, loved and given the Electroheads stamp of approval. We ship to the UK, EU and US, so hit the link down in the description below to find out more, and use the code ALISH50 at checkout for a £50 discount.
To get people out of their cars, currently, car use is really convenient and easy. You gotta make using your car a little bit harder. So that means, increasing the cost a little bit of parking, increasing the cost on fuel. But I don't just mean raise the price for the sake of raising the price. I think collate that money and use it to invest the alternatives. So use it to improve buses, use it to improve cycling infrastructure. When I talk about car-free cities, I don't mean a city with no cars at all. We recognize that there will be some people who will always need to rely on cars, but we do want want most people to reduce their car use and use alternatives. And I think a key part of that isn't spoken about enough and councils aren't investing enough is car club schemes, which are brilliant. When you're not using the car, someone else is using the car, and that way it's a much more efficient method.
Congestion, which costs the UK economy approximately £6.9 billion per year, adds to the urgency of finding sustainable solutions. A swap in for e-scooters means the air would be cleaner from deadly tailpipe emissions. Congestion would ease. Public transport would be under less strain. People save huge amounts of money in running costs, and unlike a lot of bikes, an average commuter e-scooter is small and light enough to take into your office or home, so security isn't an issue. And statistically, it's less dangerous for pedestrians, creating safer streets. All we need to do is view electric scooters like we have viewed electric bikes. The only difference between the two is 2 pedals and a seat. With this in mind, I wrote to our Secretary of State for Transport, Mark Harper, for comment. Unfortunately, I never got a response. If you're still here, consider hitting subscribe for more electric mobility news and click that thumbs up. The latest statistics provide real food for thought. So when you next read vilifying media reports on how dangerous electric scooters can be, don't be swept up in the headlines. The car you own is statistically much more of a killer than these vehicles. All we need is regulation on electric scooters and riders to be reprimanded who ride dangerously. Otherwise, it's just another nail in the coffin for public health, the climate crisis, and autonomy to move around our cities. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to check out this one right here. But for now, see you later, Electroheads.